Welcome, Eric. He has his last Daniel series for us.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Stephen. All right. Well, we're excited about today. We're going to have one more big thing we want to make you aware of. But CJ, if you would come up, give it up for CJ as he comes. When we started 2024, we felt like this was a year to kind of flip the switches on a few areas. And one of them has to do, it was in our vernacular, it was in our values and DNA from day one, is that this community would be an incubator for creatives and entrepreneurs. And that this community would be a community that celebrates it, accelerates it, and looks for opportunities for these brilliant ideas that live inside your hearts and minds that just need a nudge to impact the lives of people. And so this year we're starting something called Founders and Creators. Candace made a mention of it. CJ and Stephen Gillum are the ones running the class. I'm just tag teaming. I'm going to throw in a few thoughts here and there, but these guys have created the 8-week course that is starting on February 27th. All the information's on the website. And I wanted him to share for a few minutes just to capture your hearts for those of you that should make a commitment to this 8-week course.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Candace and crew. What an honor to be here. My name is CJ, and my wife and I started a company a long time ago that's led us out here. But one of the things that stands out to me, and a story I want to share with you, is about moments. I found the moments that most changed my life are the ones that were the most unexpected. And about 12 years ago, that happened to me. I was at a church service. I'm the prideful guy that never wants to go forward at church service, so I basically never do, except this morning was different. The tug in my heart was so strong at the end of this service, I felt like I was being sucked forward without any desire to do so. I get up there, and I end up meeting a guy who I find out later was his first week on service. He was just as nervous as I was to see me and had not prayed over anyone until this point, so it was quite a comical situation. I was on the verge of breaking out in tears. I think he sensed that. He put his hand on my shoulder and prayed for me. He said, CJ, I heard something, and I want you to hear this. It sounds a little weird. It may sound a little weird, but I just want you to hear this. Here it is. You're not behind, and it's not too late. It's hard for me to say this. You're not behind, and it's not too late, he said again. He goes, I'm really nervous right now. Does that mean anything to you? And I said, oh man, you don't know that 17 years ago, my wife and I on our honeymoon were so excited about entrepreneurship and starting a company that we actually scheduled our honeymoon to scout locations for our business that we were ready to start. 17 years ago, and we never did it. Why? Fear, money, 4 sons, life, other opportunities. And it wasn't an opportunity to beat myself up or for us to beat ourselves up. It was just an opportunity to go, there's this thing in me when he said those words to me. There's this thing in me that I know some of you feel. I grit my teeth when I say it because it's so real that I had to act on. And that's what sucked me forward. Founders and Creators was established, initially at least, with a vision to equip you, those of you that come. And our response has been phenomenal. With the tools, the inspiration, and the motivation to give you the ability to take meaningful action on your dreams, on your calling, on your hopes, and on your desires. You can call it whatever you want, but the theme is meaningful action. This is not an opportunity to learn from experts, because I don't know that I am one. I'm just an experienced journeyman going along the journey with you. And so is Stephen. So it's an opportunity for you to take meaningful action. Right now, many of you are already entrepreneurs. Founders and Creators is for you, because some of you that are already entrepreneurs need a kick in the pants. You need a dose of inspiration, a dose of motivation, a reminder that there's a whole bunch of people in the room right now that know exactly what you're going through and are right there with you. But it's also for those of you who have this dream, 17 years and going for me at the time, and you haven't acted on it yet. You want to, you've meant to, you've tried to, but these things have gotten in the way. And so far you started pinning it and posting it and sharing it, but that's not enough. And Founders and Creators is an opportunity, if those of you who hear me, hear these words. You're not behind. It's not too late. And we created this as an 8-week course so that for those of you that this resonates with right now, could go, that's me. Is it for everyone? No, it's not. But is it for you that hear my words right now are going, got this thing and you grit your teeth like I do, then yeah, it's for you. We cannot wait to partner with you. We cannot wait to help you grow, to give you questions, to give you the ability at the end of 8 weeks to have what you need to move forward with meaningful action. That's what it's about. I'm so grateful for a church that would honor this, that would call this out, that would believe in Stephen and I and so many others of you. Eric, thank you. We can't wait.
Thank you. So if you have any questions or interest and you haven't signed up yet, he's going to be here right around here after the gathering. Go find him, and we just want to start taking big baby steps towards this idea of this community being an incubator for creativity and for entrepreneurs. All right, you guys ready? Well, I made the decision. Today is the last talk of Daniel. I know, you're so sad, I know. I hope he brought Kleenex just to weep with me. I made the executive decision that today was the final, last installment of our Daniel series. I've always told myself, if you're ever an athlete in a professional capacity, which is not going to happen at this point in my life, but if it ever happened, you always retire when you're on top. So I'm just I'm just going to finish this while it's good. I don't want to milk this and try to, I just want to, when we end solid, we end it right there. So that's my goal today. We're going to end on top, in tune with the Super Bowl last weekend. So this week is I don't know, I'm trying to find a way to enter into this talk today. So anyway, today is the last of our Daniel series. I know we'll talk more in the future in different ways, but I've enjoyed this talk for a myriad of reasons. One of them is kind of selfish, because I've spent so much time studying and talking about Daniel for honestly about 2 decades. But it's been sporadic through the years. It's here and there in bits and pieces. And so for me, it's actually been really helpful to get it down into a 5-week segment with you guys. But a lot of people ask me, hey, where can I hear this stuff? I'm like, I don't know. I spoke it in 2011 and 2003. And I think last year, so it's nice just to get it kind of organized and have it available for obviously just as a resource. All these talks are on our podcast. I'm curious, how many of you have been here for at least 2 of the weeks out of the 4 so far? Okay, many of you. If for some reason you've not caught up on all the weeks, it's all on the podcast. Today will be on the podcast later this week. But this is really designed to elevate your life, for you to go deeper into the realities of living in a world today, and how do we not just function, but how do we thrive? And how do we actually bring positive, beautiful influence into every culture that we step into? Last week we ended in Daniel chapter 6. It was 60 years after Daniel chapter 1. Daniel is now around 80 years old. And because of a corrupt political system, it triangulated Daniel into a corner where if he was to continue his practices of following Jesus, he would end up being thrown into the lion's den. And we learned last week that Daniel's like, I'm going to continue to do what I'm going to do because of his faithfulness, which we talked about. The beauty of Daniel is found in his faithfulness, his ability to stay committed to a set of ideas and practices over an extended period of time. He ends up in the lion's den, and the long story short, the lions leave him alone, and then the king pulls him out. And then they throw his opponents into the lion's den, and the Bible said the bodies never touched the ground. And so we had this amazing story where we focused on Daniel's faithfulness, his ability to be devoted, as well he was a man of excellence. We took some time to talk about excellence, which can also be understood as exceptional and extraordinary. How many in here would like to see your life be more exceptional and more extraordinary than what it is right now? If your hand's not raised, I don't know why you would not raise your hand for that. That was not a trick question. But I know for me, I want my life to continue to be one of excellence, exceptional, and obviously growing in every area of my life in skills, abilities, and talents, and all of that. So we ended in Daniel 6. If you want to open your apps or your Bibles to Daniel chapter 7, we're going to start there. I'll give you a specific address in a moment. But I need to give a little bit of a backdrop because Daniel chapter 7 actually happened before Daniel chapter 6. For those of you that are not aware, Daniel is not a chronological book. There's some hopping around. There's some going in the future and coming back to the past. And it's the way the book was laid out. And if you're not aware, the chapters and verses were added many years later after these manuscripts were written. So the organization of it was determined later in the process of putting together the scriptures. So when we read today, understand this actually happened roughly 14 years before Daniel chapter 6. even though it's the next chapter. The first 14 verses of Daniel chapter 7 is a vision that Daniel has. Now, it's a fascinating vision. We're not going to read it, but it's got a lot of metaphors, it's got a lot of images, and it's got a lot of symbolism. That is just, when you start entering into the realms of visions and dreams, it's amazing what can happen in a dream, and it feels so real, but what you see isn't real, if that makes sense. It's like, that image is not even possible, but in a dream, it's totally possible. And Daniel, as we mentioned in week 1, it's actually a companion book to the book of Revelation. For those of you, I remember as a young kid, my favorite book in the Bible was Revelation because it was weird. You know, multi-headed beast with 5,000 eyes and 3 arms, and I mean, it was just this eccentric, made no sense, and it was so intriguing to me as a little boy. My dad was always like, why do you like Revelation? It's so confusing. I'm like, I don't know. It's where the creative like to be. They like to be in this abstract world, and it didn't make sense, but it did make sense. And Daniel is a companion book to the book of Revelation, so you get some of the similar interesting, mystical language in the book of Daniel. But Daniel had a vision, and in the vision, someone comes to him and explains the vision. I'll keep it very short, but there's 4 beasts that he sees in the vision, and then he gets explained what those beasts are. So we're actually going to pick up in verse 15 of chapter 7. I, Daniel, was troubled in spirit, and the vision that passed through my mind disturbed me. Stop right there. How many have ever had visions or dreams that are disturbing? Not all dreams are positive and beautiful and angelic. Some of them are just flat out disturbing, and this is one of those. Verse 16, I approached one of those standing there, and I asked him the meaning of all of this. So he told me and gave me the interpretation of these things. The 4 great beasts are 4 kings that will rise from the earth. Verse 18, but the holy people of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. I want you to make a note of verse 18. We're going to circle back to that in a little bit here. Verse 19, then I wanted to know the meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others and most terrifying, with its iron teeth and bronze claws. The beast that crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head and about the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell. The horn that looked more imposing than the others, and that had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. Stop right there. Just think about that for a moment. A horn that has a mouth and eyes. That's a very interesting image. So this is what we're talking about, very interesting imagery. Now let's go to verse 21. As I watched, this horn was waging war against the holy people and defeating them. Last verse, verse 22. Until. The Ancient of Days came and pronounced the judgment in favor of the holy people of the Most High, and the time came when they possessed the kingdom. So here we have this encounter that Daniel had. Very mythical, very mystical, incredible metaphors and imagery going on. And there was an explanation for these 4 beasts. There's all these horns and eyes and all these other stuff. But I want to draw your attention to the 4 beasts for one primary reason, to give you kind of a historical and biblical context of what's transpiring in Daniel's day and what transpires all the way up to today. I want you to understand also that Daniel's life not only affected his time or even the generation after. Daniel's life actually had a direct effect on us today in 2024. What he saw is what we're actually living in and experiencing and will continue to experience. And I think this is beautiful because I think oftentimes we don't realize that our life actually impacts the generation that we will never see. I want you to understand something. If you're living your life without the realization that the decisions you make, the things that you do, the things you run down, the things that you run away from, if you don't understand that these decisions that you make in life do not impact the generation that you'll never see, you're missing out on one of the greatest opportunities of being alive. And that is your decision today actually create the future for a generation you'll never meet. So live life with purpose live life with the reality, the realization that what I do has a direct effect on the people that I will never, ever meet. So we have Daniel, he's getting these images, and before we just try to apply this passage to our life, and this is what we kind of do in kind of our modern thinking, okay, the direct connection to understanding this verse means this today in 2024, we need to understand the historical and obviously the theological and biblical context. The four beasts actually represent four distinct empires. It's traditionally understood and traditionally embraced. The first beast that you read about in the beginning of Daniel 7 is a lion. The lion is actually representation of the Chaldeans or King Nebuchadnezzar, which we talked about in week 1 and week 2. The second beast is the bear. The bear is reference to the Persian Empire, which was the next empire that came after the Chaldean Babylonian Empire came. The Persian Empire came, so that was the second beast. The third one was the leopard. This is making reference to the Greek Empire that eventually emerged. And this is where we learn about Alexander the Great, who many say was the greatest empire builder in all of human history. He was roughly 22 years old when he came into power, and within 6 years took over the entire Babylonian Empire by the time he was 28 years old. This was a kid dominating the world, and it took him another 6 years to take over India and different parts of Asia. The largest empire was accomplished by a man in his 20s and early 30s in a matter of 12 years. This is the third beast, which was the leopard. Interesting, Netflix just came out with a new docuseries on Alexander the Great. I loved it. Now, if you watch it, don't blame me if you get mad. It's your problem. You choose what you watch. I thought it was incredibly helpful, and it was actually interesting to watch it in the context of redoing this series on Daniel. The last but not least is the unidentified beast. It's a very interesting, mythical sounding looking character that you read about. It is the beast that refers to the Roman Empire. And in the vision, that's the one that terrified Daniel the most, was the Roman Empire. Now, what comes after the Roman Empire? This is where Jesus enters the conversation. So Daniel's vision was actually portraying four different empires, but then in verse 18 and verse 22, we get introduced to the next empire or the next kingdom. So let's reread verse 18 and 22 in the context that we've now understood. But the holy people of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. Verse 22, until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in the favor of the holy people of the Most High, and the time came when they possessed the kingdom. So when we're reading about these four empires, these four beasts, Daniel all of a sudden sees a kingdom is coming that will not just be short term. It won't be just a season of time. It's actually a kingdom that will be established forever. This is the kingdom that you and I are a part of. When you follow Jesus, you're a part of this kingdom. This is wildly intriguing to me, because Daniel is able to see into the future, get an understanding, so his life had a direct effect on us today. So when you fast forward now into the book of Luke, if you're making notes, write down Luke 12:32. We're not going to turn there, but in there, Jesus is having a conversation with his disciples, and he looks at them. The famous passage, many of you are familiar, do not worry passage. Don't worry about the clothes you wear. Don't worry about this. So in the middle of this beautiful teaching on don't worry about so much, in there he throws this line and he says, don't worry. It is my Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. So Daniel saw it. Jesus steps into the time of the fourth beast, the Roman Empire, and he begins to establish what we call the kingdom of heaven. There's only a few explanations for how Jesus could take 12 blue-collar and white-collar men and turn them into world changers. How do you go from that to completely turning the world upside down? You have to understand that becoming, forgive my lack of being able to describe it, but normal men, they get around Jesus, and within a period of a few years, they go on to change the course of human history. What explains that? I know the easy answer is Jesus. I obviously know that. there's something much deeper going on here that we need to grab a hold of. I know Jesus is the one that changes life, and then you go change the world. But there's still some psychological, emotional processes that you have to go through to get there. There are still some frameworks that we have inside of us that actually inhibit us from actually changing the world. We may believe it, we may know God called us to it, but we don't actually do it. But here we have a story of 12 men, lived with Jesus, ran with him for 3 years. In a short period of time, they go on to actually change the course of human history. What does that? There's a framework that I worked with for many years. And it's a framework that I worked with around the idea of helping us to understand what is this thing in us. When you wake up in the morning, you know you have a calling and a purpose. Like, it's what gets you out of bed. It's the thing that just makes you keep going no matter how many times you fail or how many times you succeed. It's like something is driving you. And this last week, I got in a really deep conversation with Erwin, and he just took it to 2.0. He refined it. He took it to another dimension. And so some of the stuff I want to share with you, a fruit of that conversation. And I texted him last night. I said, thank you for refining some of the framework that I've been working with. And it's this idea that when you know you are chosen, you have a much higher chance of being successful in life. When you look at culture, when you look at certain cultures that believe they are chosen and raise their children with the idea that they are chosen, that culture had a way higher chance of succeeding than a culture that does not believe they are chosen. Let's take Mormonism, for example. One of the reasons why they are so successful in so many areas of life, because they believe they are chosen. Look at Judaism. Judaism, they believe they are chosen God's people. And why do people that come from that ethnicity, that culture, are some of the wealthiest, most successful people on the planet, not just by a few, and they're also one of the most oppressed people group ever to walk to the face of the earth. And in the middle of oppression and opposition, they continue to rise and be the most successful people. Why? Because they believe they were actually chosen. To understand something here, you may believe in Jesus, but if you don't actually believe you're chosen, you have a lower chance of succeeding in life. So I want to propose to you, the disciples, when they got around Jesus, they began to realize, we have been chosen for this. And this is what compelled them to shed off any world thinking that diminished them down to just status quo, and to turn them into men that knew they were called to change the world. Some of you have actually chosen to not be chosen. So there's a framework. I want you to write these 3 words down: design, calling, and character. Design, calling, and character. Let's unpack these for a minute. Design is that you know what you were designed to do. It's intrinsic to you. It's the thing in you that it almost comes easy to you. It's the skill, talent, it's the ability that just comes so easy to you. In fact, when you put any effort into that area of your life, it accelerates quickly. It's that thing you were designed to do. And you can also tell what you're designed to do by putting effort into areas that are not accelerating. It doesn't mean you don't grow in certain areas, but you will find out what you're designed to do by how much effort you put into something, and putting 1x of effort actually have 10x output. There are areas in my life that I work hard to grow in, and I just get worse at it. But there are other areas in my life, if I give it any attention, any mental energy, any emotional energy, any time, it accelerates quickly. Why? Because that's what I was designed to actually do. So part of being chosen is also understanding what you are designed to do. What's interesting about design, if you live more from a design standpoint, you can have multiple careers, because you're no longer career-driven, you're design-driven. So when you are design-driven, the domain and dimension that you step into, you can step into many of them. And we have a culture that tells you to be career-driven. We need to flip that and say you're actually design-driven. When you're design-driven, you can have multiple careers, or you can do multiple things at once, because it's not the thing that you do that determines what you do, it's how you are designed. And in that, you have multiple expressions of who you are. If you want to move out of career-driven, then you need to find out why and what you are designed. The second thing is calling. Let's talk about calling for a second. Other words for calling would be destiny. For some people that have different belief systems or different faith systems, fate is another word that you'll use. So calling, destiny, and fate. You see, your design pushes you, but your calling pulls you. It's that thing that when you wake up, something out there, it's pulling you forward. Your design is pushing you, but there's the destiny out there. You're still moving towards this idea. Something is pulling you. You can't even maybe articulate it. You can't even grab it, but something in your future is pulling you forward. That's your calling. That's your destiny. That's what you're on earth for. What's interesting about calling is the design pushes you, your calling pulls you, but when you know your calling, it actually helps you to process pain correctly. It actually helps you to navigate failures and still carry the conviction for the future. If you don't have a sense of calling, then when you hit crisis and tragedy, your narrative says, my story must be ending. So design's what pushes you, calling is what pulls you, and when you live with the conviction that you've been called, you've been chosen, you can navigate any crisis, any tragedy, and any failure, because the conviction is beyond that. And yet this is somehow a part of this process to get to this place that I'm called to. The third area is character. What's fascinating about design and calling, there's nothing you can do about it. You didn't choose it. It was given to you. It's that thing that God said, this is how I've designed you to be, and this is the calling on your life. When it comes to character, that one is completely up to you. What you do with the character, that's not on anyone else. That is entirely up to you. What's fascinating about character is if you don't actually have the character in your life, your design will now become a design flaw. You'll now create destructive habits in your life because the character is not there. And all of a sudden you move into a different space. Your design will now be used for the wrong purposes. It'll have the wrong motivations. It'll have the wrong why. I'm trying. I am definitely trying. You see, without discipline, your design never gets refined. So I want to challenge you today. Some of you are working really hard on design and calling, but you actually can do nothing about it. But what you can do is your character. Is your character getting stronger, or are you content with it? Character is a fascinating thing. I don't know if you've spent much time thinking about it, but we often think of, I built my character, I'm good to go. It's not how it works. You see, the more you experience life, your character needs to go deeper. And life actually gives you an opportunity to grow your character. So as we start talking about being a chosen people, as we start talking about being a people that are called to something, understand the character is incredibly important. And when you don't have the character that matches or is deeper than your conviction, design, and calling, design flaws begin to show up. And all of a sudden, you begin to develop destructive natures and habits. And what makes it even worse is you begin to aim it at other people. So there's a shadow side to knowing that you're chosen. There's a shadow side to knowing that you're called. I'm going to pick on one aspect of Christianity. There's a branch of Christianity called Calvinism. Calvinism is built on the fundamental idea that you're blessed at the expense of someone else. You see, the shadow side of knowing you're chosen is arrogance, is self-centeredness, is narcissism. The shadow side of knowing that you are called to something, that you wake up every day with this reality, I have a purpose, I have a calling, and I've been chosen. The shadow side of that, if you don't have the character, you move to arrogance, you move to self-centeredness, and this is one of the reasons why I think a lot of believers, a lot of people that follow Jesus do not want to be chosen because they're so scared of becoming arrogant. They're so scared of becoming self-centered. They're so scared, so they've chosen to not be chosen. Telling you what, to make the effort to try it out. And believe me, when you start getting off the track, God will warn you. This is the thing. Anytime someone collapses or falls in their life, it doesn't mean they never had an opportunity to change. God is so good that he will constantly remind you, hey, what's that issue of your heart? And if you don't deal with it, all of a sudden it can move into a space where now you have a design flaw. I want to encourage you, err on the side of taking great risk of your calling and being chosen. Are you guys with me this afternoon? So the shadow side, so we have to ask the question, so how do we mitigate this? How do we mitigate this reality? We're chosen, we're called. Daniel prophesied that Jesus begins to release this idea, the kingdom. God wants to give you the kingdom. It is his good pleasure to give you the kingdom. So how do we mitigate the shadow side of arrogance and self-centeredness? How do we mitigate that? It's actually found in the life of Jesus. This is the beautiful part. There's option, there's opportunity to mitigate this shadow side. So by the time you get to the Gospels, Jesus stepped on the scene during the Roman Empire. And the context is so complex, and I've tried to simplify it today, that the Roman Empire, as it's emerged and Jesus steps into it, the Jewish people that have been oppressed for centuries are now aware of this promise that the Messiah is coming. And when you've been oppressed and the Messiah is coming, your thought is this: how do we overthrow our oppressors? And this was the rhetoric that was happening in Jewish culture, like, we're going to overthrow the Roman Empire, and we are now going to sit on the throne. Some of you remember there's a moment between the mom of the disciples and Jesus. Hey, when the kingdom comes, can my boys sit next to you on the throne? She had this idea that Jesus was going to sit on the throne, replace the Roman Empire, and her boys would sit next to him in the context of a political government system. And Jesus made a comment and said, oh, you have no idea what kingdom I'm talking about. You see, when Jesus introduces himself, he does it in a way that's actually quite compelling, and it actually violated everything specifically the Jewish people at that time believed in. And it's found in the book of Matthew chapter 5. When you believe the Messiah is coming to set you free and to overthrow the Roman Empire, you're ready for that rally speech. And Matthew 5 is that first campaign speech that Jesus is making. He stepped up to the mic and he said, hey, blessed are the poor in spirit. I guarantee you, people in that room said, wait a second here, I thought we were overthrowing the empire. And Jesus said, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the meek. And he goes down this incredible list, which was the opposite of overthrowing an empire in a physical sense. So how do we mitigate the reality that we're chosen? Instead of being superior, we actually go the opposite. We go to serving. The one thing that I see mistaken in the context of kingdom and dominion is that we think we're called to just become superior to all of society. But actually you're called now to actually serve humanity more than you were able to before. And Jesus goes on within chapter 5 and chapter 6, he starts making comments like this. He says, if someone slaps you, give him the other cheek. What's he saying? When the Roman Empire, when a Roman soldier slaps you, let him slap your other cheek. And then he says, hey, when they want you to carry their pack for a mile, go 2. He said, when a Roman soldier comes up to you and asks you to carry their pack for a mile, walk 2 miles. What's he doing? He's overthrowing an empire. Are you guys with me? So how do you mitigate this reality that you're chosen? How do you mitigate this reality that you're designing? and you are called to something greater, and it's what pushes you and what pulls you, you mitigate it by the reality that Jesus teaches us how to walk down this path where it's incredibly courageous, and at the end of the day, it essentially changes the entire face of humanity. So today, I want you to realize you're chosen, you're designed for something, and something is pulling you into the future, but character is up to you. Why don't you stand? Today, we wrap up this series on Daniel. There's so many things to walk away with, but today I want you to walk away with this personal responsibility and this promise that Daniel makes and Jesus makes. The kingdom is at hand. And Jesus says, repent, for the kingdom is at hand. So all the domains and dimensions of the kingdom that we've yet to explore are actually available. And that God is actually bringing us into a space. He's inviting us into a space. And as we do that, let's be intentional about the character in our lives. Let's be intentional of going deeper in those areas of our life. And so I pray today for all of us that we would move into a greater awareness of what we are designed to do. That we become even more aware of the calling on our life, that thing that pulled us. And I pray for people in this room that are in the space in between, don't know if they're chosen or if they have a purpose. I pray in this next season of life, no matter what they put their hands to, they become into contact what they were designed to do and what they were called to do. And then in the midst of all of that, God, I ask that you would build character in us. Give us more opportunities to test our integrity. Give us more opportunities to test our faithfulness. Give us more opportunities to protect the things and to steward the things that need to be protected and steward. And so we thank you for this opportunity to grow as people and as a community. And everybody said, amen. All right. Thank you. Before